recording on the Zoom.
It's the Meg-John and Justin
podcast. Yay.
Woo!
Yay.
Oh.
Hello, dear listener, dear gentle listener. Hi.
Hi.
We are Meg-John and Justin. We're here. We're answering questions this week. If you're new to us, we're like kind of well, we're not really the UK Dan Savage, are we? We are the UK Meg-John and Justin. We're the worldwide Meg-John and Justin.
The global Meg-John and Justin.
We do advice and information and thoughts podcast. Introduction to who we are.
We talk about stuff. Sex and relationships, and your relationship with yourself and the world, and it's a bit political. We do like a few different kinds of podcasts. So occasionally we do one of these where we answer a few questions that people have written in, because it's really, really nice to get questions from people and answer them. Some of them we're storing up to do longer answers on. So if you have written and you're not getting something, especially like on kink or breakup, we just figure those are bigger topics. So we're going to do a bunch on that. So yeah, we sometimes do these answering questions, but we also often do podcasts that are just us talking about a theme, and then we do very occasionally have a guest as well. Is that our three kinds that we really do?
We'll do, yeah. It's mostly us talking about a theme. That's the thing we do mostly. Yeah. Me and you.
And some of those are shorter. Quite often these days we're actually going for a topic where we prep a bit in advance, and we both go away and read about it and do a really big one on that. So that's kind of our go-to right now. But like occasionally throw in an interview and occasionally throw in a answering questions one.
I'm loving the way you're describing this. It's really it makes it sound really good.
We are really good.
It is really good. You know? It is really good.
There are people here who say we're amazing.
I know, that is nice. So thank you so much for your questions, and again, thank you so much for your feedback. Your feedback is wonderful, and it really makes our day whenever we get lovely feedback. So thank you.
Yeah.
So much,
thank you,
gentle listener. So shall we get cracking? We've got 4 questions. We're going to try and do them unpack absolutely everything today, aren't we?
It's not going to be an hour and a half. Probably it's going to be an hour and a half. That's
we're not going to unpack every single one.
No, I'll give a heads up for the themes though, just in case people content notey, but also people can zip ahead if they want to. And if you're one of the people who did the questions, which ones we're going to answer. So we've got a question about re-navigating friendships when you've been a support person for somebody else. We've got a question about re-navigating relationships where your ex-partners and you're now getting to know each other again. We've got one about intrusive thoughts, and then we've got one about somebody who was with a man and then was with a woman, and how they navigate that, particularly with their friends. That's the broad headlines, I think.
Got a lot to say about that, friends. Okay, so right, so this first one.
Yes.
So we're not going to read out the whole question. Again, dear listener, if you do send us a question, if you could keep it snappy, that would be great. And also, if there is something, as this person has said, that if there's something identifiable in your question, we will not read that out. So we're kind of like paraphrasing the question here. So that paraphrased question is, how do we navigate a friendship where one person ends up doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of supporting the other person, like caring for the other person, helping them through some difficult things, or doing a lot of support? How do you navigate that during and after that time as well, I guess? And how do we name it but without making them feel bad or without shaming them? And how can they both start to feel themselves in the friendship, which is, I think, what they're wanting to aim for from their relationship, which is where they both feel like they can do themselves, which is a big topic in and of itself.
Well, I think it's just, partly it's sort of normalizing, I imagine this is relevant to absolutely everybody, because, just during our lives, we're going to go through periods of needing more or less support and care, having more or less of it to offer. So I think it's just, a big important piece is just to normalize that is really standard. And actually, it's great if we can do that, rather than getting stuck in a place of like we're only someone who can offer support, or we're always someone who needs support. So it's a great thing to just keep an eye on in all relationships, isn't it? Like how much am I giving and getting? Yeah, with this.
Yeah. I think it's not necessarily like to think of it as like a ledger, but more think like who's more thinking like who's up, like who's got some spare capacity at the moment. And it's like, I think that as we've said on other podcasts, that if a friend is going through some really, really difficult time, but you just don't have it to give, then it has to be that you have to be able to say, I just can't. Like, is there
really important?
And it's
not. And it's not good for that person either. Like I've had that where somebody's like overstepped themselves because I've needed help, and you can feel it, and you only feel worse because you just get that sense that they haven't really got it and they're overstretching themselves for you, and either they end up resentful or it just doesn't feel genuine. So I think it's really good piece to keep an eye on in your friends, in your circle of people, of like where are you at in the different dynamics on this.
Should we talk about me and you here for a little bit to talk about us as an example? Is that okay? I mean, we talked about
it's really before, okay.
Just flagging it up now.
Thank you for checking.
So me and you are very, very close friends, and so we are in a position where one of us has needed support from the other, or the other has needed support from the other specifically, or there is this kind of ongoing support piece where we're both able to be with each other in support, and kind of there's more like to and fro rather than entirely to or entirely fro. And there are times where we've had to be entirely to and entirely fro during difficult times in our
I love that.
There's
fro, and there's to and fro.
Yeah. I just literally came up with that. But you
modes,
but also you talked about Pema Chodron on here as well, didn't you?
Pema Chodron basically describes exactly the same. Like there's to, there's fro, and there's to and fro. That there's people that you have a lot to offer to. There's people that you really need to get some from, and then there's ones where it's just much more a sense of alongsideness. I think is how she describes it, and that you might move through different ones. And someone who's needed a lot of support in the last year because of going through all this trauma stuff, I've really also valued the few relationships where I've been on more of the other side. They've been quite an important linchpin to me. Some of them have been clients, and some friends where it's been a bit more just that relationship I've got a lot to offer, and it's again, it's worth remembering that even somebody who's going through something really hard, or somebody's got a chronic health problem or whatever, don't assume that they haven't got anything to give, because it may be that that's incredibly valuable to them to have, to have some relationships where they can do a bit more on the giving side of support.
Yeah, particularly if it's not something that they are if it's something else, like it's again, it's just to think about. It's to think about where we've got capacity and where we don't. And it's not necessarily that our capacity is quite neatly in one like container. It might be that somebody that if the thing that someone else is struggling about is also something we're struggling about, we might not have any capacity. But if it's about something entirely different, or just something that we're quite good at, or something where we might actually have some extra capacity. And also, it's an opportunity for that person to also kind of like to remind them that they have this connection, and that they can be as much to as they are fro. I probably mix those up. And that can be also helpful for them sometimes too, I think. So the thing that you and I, that you're really good at doing this with me, is to check in with me about where we are with this. And we're often having these conversations about and they're not long conversations, but it is like a brief check-in, like you might say something like, I just wanted to check in about how you're feeling about this, because are we in like to and fro? Because I know that we were in fro or to. Want to, check that this is okay, and is there anything going on for you? But also there have been times where we've both needed to and fro with like a capital T. And we have both been able to give it to each other, and we've navigated by who's going first, like.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little bit like borrowing money off someone as well. It's like a bit like it's on the person who is, borrowing the money, or it's on the person who is getting a lot of support for a period to keep checking in with the person they're borrowing the money off or the person they're getting a lot of support from. Like, is this still feeling okay? Is it still feeling balanced? And I did that with you recently about advice giving, and found that really helpful. Like, I really turned to you in an hour of need, and you gave me some really valuable advice. But then I checked in afterwards, like how that had been for you, and like what's our dynamic when I am advice receiving from you, and that was just really, really helpful. So sometimes it's super helpful to name this stuff, especially if you're feeling a bit uneasy about it, if you're a bit like, oh, I'm not sure, is that okay, or would that always be okay? Like, naming it can lift a whole load of stress off the whole thing, of just being like, oh right, we both see this dynamic that's happened, we're both aware of it, and we know that the other person's definitely okay with it, or we've given them a chance to say, actually, that was a bit too far or something. Yeah.
And this is the key to our answer here, isn't it? That it's about naming the dynamic rather than making it about the individual, or making it about rather than making it about like a ledger, that it is just, I've noticed that that this is the dynamic at the moment. And
or even before that, like, I'm curious how your experience are dynamic. I feel like I've had friends where I feel like something shifted between us recently, and I just wanted to give us an opportunity to both talk about how that is. And there's ways of, like, if it is like, oh, actually we want to kind of bring it back to a different model, or more of a to and fro, like, there are ways of bringing that in a structured way. Like, I have some friends where we do check in, like, they get 5 minutes, I get 5 minutes at the beginning of every conversation, so there's definitely like a structure for everyone to do some sharing. And other relationships that would just feel overkill, that it's just, it goes nicely into an easy dynamic. But if you're shifting from one thing to another, it can be useful to have a bit more of a specific structure to how you have communication while you're in the shifting period. So that's just something, if like both these people agreed, we'd like to go back to to and fro, but we've got a bit stuck in this one way dynamic, then you might want to bring in some more explicit structures to how you have conversations during that interim time or something.
And they want to know how to bring it in without naming or shaming the other person, but it is by just saying, look, the thing is that you're as much part of this as they are. Like, we all in the to and fro, and in the giving and the getting, like, we all get from giving, I think, and some of us get from giving depending on the kinds of dynamics that we value. Like, some of us really, really value being there for others all the time, because we really get a lot from that. And if we're honest with ourselves, and that's certainly me, if I'm honest with myself, I get a lot from giving, and that's not always a good thing, I think. And so there is this thing of, sure, there's a film about this, like, is there such a thing as a completely selfless act? I think it might be a Kevin Smith film, but I'm not saying that you're being selfish, but I'm saying, but notice that that there is a benefit to you here as well. It's not that you are entirely, being there for them. And, like, notice that you could draw a line here as well, and that whilst you're giving the support, whilst you're giving the help, it's very important for you, but more important for the other person, that you are making sure that you're only giving as much as you can give at that time.
And this is something I do, this is something I do like about the wheel of consent. I know we don't necessarily agree on how helpful that is, but the wheel of consent, Betty Martin's idea, you can Google it online, there's a lot of overviews of it. It does distinguish when, like, you could say you're giving or you're getting, whether it's touch or support or whatever it is, but also who's it for. So sometimes you're giving, but it's for you, and sometimes you're giving and it really is for the other person, and sometimes you're getting and that's for you, and sometimes you're receiving from somebody but it really is for them that you're doing the thing. So I think that's quite useful here to think, like, who's giving and who's getting support, but also who's that kind of for. And in some relationships it really might be like, but maybe like a parent-child growing-up relationship where the parent still really wants to feel that they're giving something to the kid, so the kid kind of accepts their support even though it's like, oh God, mum, so like, having that distinction between who's giving and who's getting and who it's for is quite like having those as two different axes rather than assuming that the giver is always
I know that you like the wheel of consent for its bang. It confuses me every time we talk about it. I don't know why.
It is quite confusing. Yeah,
I like
keeping in mind, like, who's it for?
Who's it for?
Yeah, who's this for?
Yeah,
brilliant. It's a bit simpler, isn't it? Yeah.
Do we want to also talk about, you might also want to reflect on here, like, is this a pattern of yours as well? Like, are you like a big like daddy bear type person? We've got the patterns or the dynamics page in our Make Your Own Relationship User Guide available at our website for £2.50 for an instant download. Are you somebody who regularly takes that kind of role in your relationships? Is there something about you, about your personality, where that is very important, in which case that's something you might want to check in, because that might not be something that other people see in you or value in you, or might not. It might be something that you could hold on to a bit less tightly if that is something that you've held on too tightly.
And sometimes we can become a real giver, because we don't want to show our vulnerability, and that actually can be quite hard for other people. Like, we might feel like we're doing quite a good thing, but actually, it's really hard sometimes for people to get support from someone who never comes to them for support. So that's where this balance is worth thinking about. It may you can often I like the drama triangle idea, where there's kind of victim, rescuer, and persecutor, and you can think about like how often you fall into those roles in relationships. And generally the idea is, if you're too into that kind of rescuer thing, it is quite disempowering for other people, and it may be that you're trying to avoid any sense that you're vulnerable, or even that you're trying to avoid ever being the bad guy. And politically, we really see at the moment how dangerous it is to believe you're just a good, safe person, and then you really struggle when people tell you that you've hurt them, whether that's kind of in this bigger cultural sphere or in our interpersonal relationships. It is important to own that all of us has the capacity to be giving and supporting in some ways. All of us will sometimes be on that victim or survivor side, and all of us will sometimes hurt other people, and not to deny that we can occupy any of those three places on the triangle.
It doesn't sound like the listener is doing this, but it is.
No.
But it is like a thing where where there is an element of power over it, that we can hold someone else in submission to us if we are constantly the one giving them support and not allowing them to give it back to us. But also that might, as you were saying, also that there might be something in our past, or something to do with our own experience of care, giving and receiving, that might prevent us from feeling able to receive care ourselves, and so we're giving it out all the time.
Or we can be hooked in. We can be hooked in by the other person. That it might be more their stuff playing out, that they're only comfortable when they're in that more submissive getting advice place, and they are just kind of pulling us constantly into that dynamic that we don't really want to be in. That's another option. Sorry, you were going to say?
No, that's all right. I think that's. I was just going to repeat something else I was going to say, but in a different way. But I think that's that, isn't it? So it's like having this kind of conversation with them and trying to do it in a way, not just sitting someone down saying, I've got to have a very important conversation with you. It's like, if you can be talking about it in the same tone that we are, I'm noticing this, talking about it, having the conversation, think about other conversations that you have in your relationship, and how you have these kinds of conversations in your relationship at other times. So is it by text or WhatsApp or email or phone, or do you only ever do this kind of relationship kind of conversation in person? And to try and keep it in, to try and be as not detached, but for your tone, for you to be curious and open.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
That's the kind of position to be in, try to adopt our tone.
And red flag-ish would be if you don't feel able to do that, if it feels a lot more loaded to you. Like, it could be either there's some stuff coming from that other person, or there's some stuff coming from you that is older stuff or trauma stuff, and that's the kind of flag of like, okay, if you feel like maybe I do get stuck in this role all the time and it's not great for me, that maybe you need to go and do a bit of work on that, maybe a bit of therapy, or a bit of working with other folks around it. Or if it feels like, they are like, I'm literally their only support person, and they are really like loving this dynamic and it's not great for me, then maybe it's about saying to them, I do need you to do your own work around this. I maybe need you to cultivate other support. It doesn't sound like that from the question, but I do feel like keeping in mind that if it starts to feel like a really hard conversation, or you do keep bringing this up and it doesn't get heard, then there might be more going on that needs a bit of excavation, and that might not be on you to do that. It might be, on them. Yeah.
I've got something else to say. I knew it would go long. I'm sorry. If you're feeling like a sense of anger when you're thinking about this, if you're thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, or if it is like, I'm constantly giving and I'm getting nothing back, and it is anger, then really use that anger as a way of informing what's going on for you, and really that it is probably more likely to be either about you or a dynamic which has got into a really difficult place. So it's like noticing your emotions and your feelings about us as well, really. And, if you are thinking, if you are thinking of this as like give and take, then you are looking at this as like a kind of a scarcity model, that there's only so much love and support around, and I'm not getting it back. And that's, maybe start thinking about that as well. I'm not getting that sense from you, from that is where you are in your question at all. I mean, we've got your whole question in front of us. I don't think that's it, but for other people listening, that could also be it.
Yeah, and it may well be with this kind of thing that it's it really, the flag it brings up is about boundaries. Is that maybe you've really overstepped your own boundaries a lot. Again, doesn't feel like that here, but it might be in this kind of scenario where someone's just overstepped their own boundaries, and the piece of work they need to do is about really finding where their boundaries are and learning how to articulate with them to people. And I could not be more empathic about how difficult that is, because people pleasers struggle with boundaries. But that could be, boundaries could be a good thing to look up a bit more about if that's the area that you're struggling with.
Regular klaxon alert. We're experts at talking about this, but we're not always brilliant at this in our own personal lives. We're good at this with each other.
Pretty hard.
We're really good with each other.
We are.
But that's how we do it with each other. And next question.
Yes.
So
this is another. Well, it kind of links through, doesn't it? Because it's also another one about re-navigating a relationship that's shifting and changing over time. But in this case, the people concerned were a couple. I think they split up, they've been more separate, and then they've got back in contact, and they're having some nice warm contact between them online at the moment. And there's a wondering about, what kind of relationship might we have in future, particularly because the person who wrote in, their way of doing relationships has shifted into a more different kind of style. So maybe that, they're wondering, maybe like that might be a bit more open, that there could be, they might not fall into the same dynamics that they fell into in the past with this person, because their way of doing relationships is a bit more open now as well.
Might just pull out a couple of other lines as well, just to
go for it.
Also, dear listener, if you could tell us in the future, just helps us if you can tell us what pronouns to use for you, because we don't know. We know that the person writing in is talking about a he, the other person being a he, but we don't know what your gender is, dear listener. Just helps us, because
I will default to they for in that case, but that that may not be your pronoun.
So they had really exciting connection when they were together. The main challenges seem to be like a mismatched sex drive, difficulty balancing with togetherness and independence, which is something I want to pick up on. Struggle to communicate about those things, but then the reason is I see them differently now, and I would handle those quite normal challenges quite better, which is the thing again I want to pick up. But the rest of it is it's clear they hold a very special place in each other's hearts. They really enjoy being together. Vibes are good, and it feels like there's an openness from the writer-inner's side. We don't know what the other person might be open, but the listener is the writer-inner is saying, I think he's open to this, but wary, feeling under pressure. I think he's wary of being under pressure. Anyway, so there's already something going on, right? And Jay, so
this is it. I mean, one thing is, in a way, you already are. When we move away from that relationship hierarchy kind of model of only one kind of relationship counts. It's like, well, as soon as you are back in touch with an ex, you are in a relationship with an ex, and the only question is, what is this relationship going to be? How is it going to unfold over time? So in a sense, that can lift some of the pressure that it is already happening. And it's useful, I think, to move away from that model of is it this, isn't that, and it sounds like that's kind of where the writer in has already got to, is that,
Yeah.
like, let's see things in a bit more of a relationship anarchy kind of way. But obviously there is that question, right? How do we figure out, like, what's the territory here? What are we now? But that it's understandable to want to have a bit of clarity on that.
Well, I guess there is this idea of containers, and if we think
Yeah.
about how a container, is it like a cool bag with zips, or is it like a more sturdy kind of object with, like, like a big thick kind of plastic? Is it a nice cast iron enamel pot?
Yes.
Is it like it's a plastic bag with like holes in the bottom that you get from the supermarkets to prevent people from suffocation?
I love this I love this idea. It's
I like to think about containers.
Instead of it being like, there's you and there's the other person, and like, what's that relationship? It's like, what would be, you want the best thing for each other, right? You want the most consensual, the most ethical, the most free, and the most safe kind of relationship as possible. What would be the best container for that for you now? And it's a great thing just to be asking ongoing in all relationships. It may be when there's a problem that the problem is that the container isn't great, that you're holding it in the plastic bag when it really kind of needs a more solid object, or you're trying to make a big solid container for something that's really plastic bag, right?
It feels to me like what they're trying to get to at this point is like how to be present in a relationship whilst also known by it's that balance of being present and open to what's actually happening and the excitement of an unraveling and you don't quite know, but also having a container where it feels safe enough to keep it in, but which doesn't trap it. So it's like, is it okay to put it in if it's like, I'm making sourdough again at the moment. I've restarted a new starter, and sourdough starters, MJ, we'd like to do this. So sourdough starters,
I've just made my own,
they escape their container after a while, don't they? And then you have to. Yes. And also, sometimes my starter works in some containers, and in others it completely kills it. So I'm like, so you have to sometimes you have to be present to putting it in the right container at different times. Don't you, for starters. So maybe there's like maybe you treat what's happening at the moment as a sourdough starter and thinking about which is the best container for it. That might be good.
Yeah, it's really nice because it is kind of a starter, because you have, and I mean, I would be an advocate for this can really work, like me and Alex Ian Taffy, who is my other kind of co-creator. We started out as a sexual romantic relationship. It did not work very well on that container. And then we had a bit of a pause and a break. Then we got really very much like this. There was a really warm connection between us. We rekindled that in a like friendship, and then doing a bit of work together, and then realized that we had this incredible connection as co-creators, and a really, really close bond between us as friends. So this kind of renavigation can lead to something very good and very long lasting potentially, if that's what you want.
I guess there's a boundary here of like, what does X mean, like in this particular question? So is there like a breaking up and a getting back together, or is this a continuation of a new different kind of relationship? And are they is there a melancholy of trying to get back to the vibes that felt really good, but not really seeing what was really happening there? Again, in our sadness episode, we talk about this, that sometimes the melancholy of feeling not being able to like leave our body might mean that we keep going back to that and keep wanting to get those vibes. Right. It ended for what's quite good sounding reasons to me. You're like, they weren't able to talk about they weren't able to communicate effectively. They weren't able to balance togetherness and separateness, and there was a mismatch in sex drives. So, and the way that this is being worded, the questioner talks about we and he, and then starts talking about I a lot. Now, I think this is probably another podcast episode, but what happens if one person in a relationship starts listening to the Meg-John and Justin podcast, and it starts being critical about everything and wants to be intentional about everything and consensual about everything, and wants to have these kinds of conversations, and their partner is still listening to boring cycling podcasts and just isn't bothered. How does
that mismatch? But no, I feel like that's really important, for and in all relationships. So another really worthwhile imbalance to attend to is if you want to do really ethical, intentional, consensual relating, you do need the other people in your life to be enough on side, and a big conversation to have is to find out, are people up for that or not? And if there really aren't, and that is really what you want, then I think there has to be limits of, like, you know, really saying clearly, well, this is what I can offer if you're not in that territory. For me, and I have a bit of a rule of thumb of like, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that person's up to for doing their own emotional work in some way. That doesn't have to be therapy, but like some kind of, they're doing their emotional work, so they're aware of what they're bringing and what they're doing in the dynamics, and that they've got other people, that they've got some kind of support network around them. Like that's what feels pretty risky if those things aren't in place. And if the other person just doesn't, like you say, just doesn't have a language for this, isn't really interested in, you know, just wants to go to the default script. So those would be great things to check out, is like, is that other person in that place? Have they come to that place as well? Or is it just that you've come to that place and you'd really love them to be there with you? You know, it's quite hard to drag somebody along with you. It's not very empowering to them. It's not much fun for you. I'm not so
I mean,
that one.
To me, this I'm going to sound a bit grumpy here. I'm sorry, dear listener, if this isn't what you want to hear, but it seems to me like you're wanting to get the vibes back, but without any clear indication that there's any kind of way of containing those vibes in a way that are going to be helpful to you. So if you want to get the vibes back and then do exactly the same relationship again, then do this. But unless this other person is able to articulate any of the stuff that you've been articulating to us in a way with you, just try someone else.
It's like, can they meet you there? And it doesn't mean you have nothing with them. Like, it sounds like you got some warmth, some fondness. You know, maybe it remains, you know, a occasional friendly messaging, once in a while a cup of coffee kind of relationship. That's the container. That's where you're asking, like, what container works well for this relationship? That might be it, unless you get that sense that they're really able to meet you in this place for a deeper connection.
You know, I would recommend having a hot friend as well. You know, like, just have it's okay to have like crushy feelings towards a mate. You know, Oscar Wilde said, I pick my friends for their good looks and my enemies for their intellects.
Nice.
You're both, mate. You're not both my friend,
what does that mean?
You're smart and very, very good looking.
Thank you.
But yeah, you know, like, it's okay we've done an episode on crushes. Like, it's okay to have a crush. And to have it like in the background, like running alongside, or just being a thought that runs through your head. And it's like, as soon as you act on your crush is gone. And actually, there's something can be quite pleasurable about a crush.
About keeping it there.
Yeah.
And it's always worth throwing in the pot, like, this question of, what are you looking for from this other person? Might it be something that you also need to find in yourself? You know, this is what I'm getting from all this trauma reading that I've been doing, is that it's so easy that we start to look for things in other people that are stuff that we feel like we can't be for ourselves. And, you know, if you've got an ex-partner, it may well be that, you know, that's somebody you did that with before, and maybe some of that pullback is that you still have that sense of, like, could they be a nice protective person for you, or a caring person for you, or something that you're not able to give yourself. So I just think, like, irrespective, I say this to everyone who's thinking about any kind of relationship. People are thinking about having a kid. I'm like, have you nurtured your own inner child, or is it that you're kind of looking to have a kid in your life that you could look after because you kind of need to look after yourself? You know, if you're thinking about having a partner, is it that you're looking for something in them that you really, you know, could do with finding in yourself? And it doesn't mean you don't have kids or you don't have partners, you know, but it's just, like, from personal experience, it's just so easy to be looking out there for stuff that you just really need to find in here. And then what you'll find out there is probably going to have a bit of more of a solid foundation, because it's not based on that kind of needing or yearning for something that you really need to find in yourself, right?
That's right. And it's the needing and the yearning that is the thing that we need to disavow, isn't it? Like,
yeah, when you've got those feelings, it kind of suggests, like, that there's something, and it's not that, again, it's not by no means easy, but I think it's really helpful to tune into what you're looking for out there and see if you might find it in here. If you're interested in this, the Plural Selves zine on my Rewriting the Rules website is a helpful place to start, and also links to some other resources as well.
There's also an activity in our Make Your Own Relationship user guide, with the first activity, which is thinking about all the different reasons why people have romantic relationships. Write them all down, not just you, but for everyone. Why do people have romantic relationships? And then you ask yourself the question, which of those can only be achieved by being in a romantic relationship? The answer is none. You can get all of those things from lots of different kinds of things. So then it's like, okay, well, how much pressure, what am I asking this one relationship to do? Am I putting a lot of pressure on this relationship? Can I, as you were saying, feed myself some of these things, some other things? And then you come to a place of want rather than yearning, and choice and freedom to choose rather than this kind of urge to experience this NRE, which if you're a regular listener, you'll know, I think NR, new relationship energy, or in inverted commas, honeymoon feeling, I think it's toxic and awful, and we need to get rid of it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
Oh yeah, pretty.
Not everyone agrees with that, but
no, I
because
agree.
also,
I think it's
like we talked about, it's when you're just going on vibes. You think it's vibes and chemistry, and it's not, because everything's biopsychosocial. So actually, you may as well. You're basically just reenacting Love Actually, and we all know how shit Love Actually is, right? So if your entire relationship is, I'm not having a go at you, dear Simon. I'm having a go at everyone else. If your entire relationship is based on this kind of, oh, it was, we had lovely times and I want to get back to that. I know you're not basic, dear listener, because you listen to us and you're nodding along and you fucking love this, but other people out there who don't listen to us, it's so basic. So don't do that. It's got to be intentional, and it's got to be, it's got to come from a place of feeling free to be able to choose, and that is the definition of consent and self-consent. And if you're just doing something because it feels good and feels like you should be doing it, and the vibes were good. Vibes aren't vibes. Vibes are biopsychosocial. It's social.
Yeah, like it's pressure from outside, and it often is this kind of like yearnings from trauma stuff as well. Like combined, it's a heady mix, and it's not great. But I feel like what this person's asking is like, how do I go into this new unfolding of this particular relationship with this kind of openness, with this kind of relationship anarchy openness of like everything's on the table, how
completely
can we
here for
which is great, and it's just about, is that other person up for that? But if that other person is not in that place, you've come to that place but they haven't, then send them a few episodes to listen to, and hopefully they will join you there imminently. No, that's not really my advice. But it's
is that what this is?
To have that conversation, because it's so hard. We feel this. When you've got to that place, if you are seeing relationships in this way, it's really hard because a lot of people haven't got there or aren't in that place of seeing things as a much more open. Like, here's all the ways we could relate. They still are in a kind of relationship hierarchy model, and relating between those places is really difficult. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but it is challenging. So it's sort of seeing how you're on the same page.
You can only see the relationship in front of you, not the relationship that it might be, because you've got to both be present with each other and also being able to communicate about this. And if the communication isn't there, then you got it. It's just right. So this is a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme or something. Basically, in order to have successful and intentional relationships with everyone, you've got to get them to listen to our podcast, and then grow.
I love it.
This is the only way we're growing our audience, mate. So
this is the aim.
And then you have to individually join our Patreon.
I don't think passively aggressively, like insisting that
that's the way.
That's the way forward. Okay.
And if you are interested in our Patreon, just give a flag for our Patreon. If you want to listen to every episode that we do, then head over to patreon.com/Meg-John and Justin, where you can join and support our podcast, which we dearly, genuinely treasure and love. We would like to turn what we do into an actual paying job for us. Like, it'd be nice to get to at least like one day a week where we can set aside, where we can get paid to do this. And at the moment we can't. So if you can help us with that, that would be great.
That's like our commercial break in the middle of two questions, and then we answer another two. I like it.
This is what they do on some of my. This is what they do on some of my favorite podcasts, where they advertise their own stuff and they ask for support. It's like, I like the way they do it.
Yeah.
Next.
We're
not going to mention it when we hear it, right?
Apparently I do it.
I've stopped myself. We're not playing their game for them, Meg-John. If they want to play the game, they will play the game. We're not helping them play the game, so we're going to be fingers on lips when we know we're not playing this game. You can drag us if you want. We're not going to drag ourselves.
No.
We're not. we love ourselves. We're not going to drag ourselves on the podcast, are we?
No dragging.
God
It's not Drag Race.
This is not the self-burning podcast.
Yes.
Put me in the oven. Edinburgh. Fine.
The next question. The next question is on intrusive thoughts. People who struggle with intrusive or invasive thoughts. It can be really common for survivors of all kinds of trauma, and it sounds like the person concerned has already got quite a lot of advice and help around intrusive thoughts, but just wanted to hear our thoughts on it. So it's certainly something, as a trauma survivor, I've been dealing with plenty over this last year. Just to flag up that they can be really hard. What kind of thing are they? I guess it's when something pops into your head of any kind. It can be a memory, it can be a kind of what if this happened, it can be just a really nasty imagining, or it can just be hard words, really critical thoughts, quite often self-attacking thoughts, feel quite intrusive. It almost feels like they come from out there in here, even though they're biopsychosocial. They come from our wider society and the experiences we've had, and they pop up from our brain. That's something has got pinged in our brain, and the thoughts or the memory is there. It's a really normal part of trauma. I guess that they're related to flashbacks. Sometimes flashbacks are of a particular memory, so that would be like a thought. Sometimes them flashbacks can be just pure emotional, just a feeling rather than a thought. So it's a bit complex, like which ones are intrusive thoughts and which ones are intrusive feelings. But my view is that you would treat all of these quite similarly, actually. So what I'm going to say applies to the whole thing. But I think understanding the neurobiology of it is really helpful. So there is there's a lot of great stuff out there about trauma and how it works in the nervous system. I did a bit of an overview on my blog, Rewriting the Rules, a post called Trauma in the Body, if that's helpful to people, because you can give yourself such a hard time about this. I shouldn't be thinking this way. I shouldn't have these thoughts. Often when we have them, we kind of ruminate on them or go around them or obsess around them. And that, you can again be sort of telling yourself off for that. But that is really understandable. Again, it's part of how the nervous system works. A lot of it comes from hypervigilance. So a lot of it's like we've learned through the trauma happening that if we could be hypervigilant, we might be able to stop further trauma happening. So we're just like always like scanning, and that's where the thoughts are coming from. It's this kind of scanning, like, is there a problem over here? Is there a problem over here? And that might involve going back over memories. And it does make sense in a way. It's like we're going back over tough memories to try and ensure that they don't happen again, or when maybe we're going over them to try and figure out, like, could we have done something different back then that we could learn from. So it makes sense that we do it, or we're planning, like, what if this thing happened, how would I manage it? But what we're also doing, unfortunately, by doing this thing that seems like it would protect us, is that we're also re-traumatizing ourselves because we're going over a really hard memory, or we're thinking of something really awful happening. So it's reminding ourselves first and foremost that this makes sense. It's a response to trauma. It's a survival strategy. It is sensible. And then reminding ourselves, but actually it's not that helpful to keep ruminating on the thoughts once they've pinged into our brain, or to sort of go there obsessively, but not to give ourselves a hard time about the fact we do it, because it just is a really understandable reaction, right?
And it also is it to sit with the response to the intrusive thought as well. So because it could be that if it is, for example, like a flashback, that it could be that the thought then triggers something, or the feeling is already triggered, but the body goes into this stress, into the sympathetic nervous system, stress and responding, and the body goes into response however you respond, and that there will be the body responds, but then the parasympathetic nervous system needs to take over and chill everything down. That is the biology you're talking about. That is an element that we can't ignore, and the body just does that. And
in a sense, it is a fight or flight or fawn often reaction. Is that our thoughts? Like when I have these big and it's often first thing in the morning for me, I'll get these kind of like noisy thoughts and a whole lot of them, and I want to keep thinking about the thing even though it's not a pleasant thing at all to be thinking about. And either it's quite fight oriented, it's like, let me go over all these things and figure out how it's somebody else's fault, you know, maybe I'm trying to think about like, oh, they're to blame, or I should get rid of them or something. Or they're very flight, you know, they're sort of like much more like, I'm trying to figure it out. So it's kind of this busy work that I'm doing again to try and save myself from pain. Or it's fawn, it's much more like, how can I placate, how can I make this okay, how can I figure out everything that might go wrong and make sure that it doesn't go wrong before it's even gone wrong, you know. So quite often they are, the thoughts really come from those, again, the like you say, the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight or freeze or fawn responses. So naming them as that can be helpful as well. Just oh right, okay, I've gone into a fight spiral, I've gone into a flight spiral or a fawn spiral here. And yeah, the answer is just being super gentle around it. As you say, anything that carry on.
Was there a thing about like noticing something in the body as well, like just noticing what the body is doing? And there's the advice we always give about grounding, isn't there, which is you know, what can noticing our senses, what can we smell, hear, taste, you know. There's the thing that is often said about, you know, 5 things in the room, something you can anyway, but
good grounding. So anything that can bring you back into the body is great. And also almost like from thoughts to feelings, because my sense is the buzzy thoughts is kind of taking you away from the underlying emotion. So certainly like your mindfulness practitioners and your trauma informed therapists would be like, can we sink down under the thoughts into the body, what's the feeling here? As you say, like if it's very worked up, soothing the nervous system so that you become more grounded is the key. So in a way you want to kind of almost like just pause it all, the content, and just do, and the other one you're saying is like 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. That's a really nice one to like go through that slowly. That brings you back into your body. Anything you can do to come to the body or to really orientate your surroundings, it calms the nervous system. But if it's not too bad, it's, you know, trying to remember to go, I call it figuring to feeling. You know, it's like I've gone into this figuring mode. Like, can I drop down into feeling? You know, if it's fight, there might be anger there. If I can really stay with the anger and what that feels like, and just feel it in my body without all the storyline about it, often I get to something much more, a deeper understanding of what's going on for me. Or similarly, if I'm in fawn, kind of figuring, I can come down into the fear and let myself just feel that fear. And again, it's like a deeper understanding. Obviously, if it's, you know, really hard stuff, then a therapist or the practitioner can help you to do it. Somatic practices are very good for helping you come to the feelings. But I think the most helpful thing for me with all of this is just that metaphor I think we've used before on the podcast about holding things in an open hand. So whether it's tough thoughts or tough feelings or tough sensations or anything, you're trying to get to this point where instead of like grasping hold of them and just, you know, accelerating them and exacerbating them, or trying to push them away and get rid of them, you're able to just stay with them quite openly. Because what we usually do with the thoughts is like, oh no, these are terrible thoughts and they're making me miserable and I just want to get rid of them and throw them away, and I try and repress them and avoid them. Or, you know, we get really attached to them and we really identify with them and go round and round, and that becomes our whole day. And it's like, can we practice holding them gently so that we can be with them, we can notice them, but we're not making, you know, that we're not making them bigger. We're not telling this big long story about them. We're just holding them as they are. And part of that is to hold them in the bigger space. So we're tending to them. I'm like, oh, I am going to have some kind of awareness and noticing that the thoughts are going around and what they are, but I'm also noticing my environment, and I'm also still engaged with the other things that are happening in my world at the moment. They haven't become all of it, and that's not easy. It takes a lot of practice because they are that's why they're called intrusive or invasive thoughts. They really do take over. But the more you can practice that, holding them in a big open space is how I like to think of it, you know. And it really can help just to sit in your environment and be mindful of the whole environment and watch the thoughts come and go. You know, that's what the mindfulness practices would say. It's like come and go like clouds, or they come and go like bubbles or something.
I mean, that's what I don't have. I have thoughts. I don't have intrusive thoughts. But if I'm finding that the thoughts are getting a way of, for example, if I'm doing yoga or I'm just wanting to enjoy a cup of coffee or to enjoy the thing I'm doing, and it's that what I do is I try to do that, come back to my body. But sometimes the thing that just helps me is to go back to where the beginning of the thought was, almost to play it back in slow-mo. And then sometimes what might happen is I'm completely able to let go of it once I realise what it is that where I was when the thought started to come in.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that I can do, just a way I deal with thoughts. That I don't find it difficult, but it's like it's a strategy that I've found that it just kind of works for me. But that everything that you're saying, I think, is useful in terms of all the stuff that we were talking when we did yoga together. When you notice a thought coming in and it drifts, and then just notice it going away without doing anything about it.
And it's still so easy to see them as a problem. Like, even though I know all this stuff, I am still getting that they kick in the morning, and I still noticed I was having this extra layer of self-criticism of like, I've lain there for 30 minutes. Being with these really quiet, unpleasant and noisy thoughts, and I haven't been able to get rid of them, and like, that's a problem. And then I remembered that was still me trying to get rid of them or avoid them, or like I still wasn't really welcoming and being gentle. So now I'm just trying to be okay with the fact that happens, and I sort of started to treat them a bit like dreams. It's like I have dreams during the night, and then I have this 30 minutes where there's this period where the thoughts aren't great, but I can kind of treat them a bit like a dream of like, oh, there might be some interesting content in there. I'm not going to grasp it super hard. It might be a bit of, just sort of random neural firing, but there might be something interesting. So I can hold it kind of gently. I tend to journal at the start of the day. So one of the things I'll be, it's like, oh yeah, what came up in that 30 minutes? And then some of it I might journal about and pay a bit of attention to, but again, not in a grasping way, but just in a curious, open kind of way. And that for me has helped. They feel a bit less intense from doing that, which is very much that, like, yeah, you're turning towards them. You're saying to them, like, I hear you. Something's up. Like, whether that's a feeling or an intrusive thought, you are telling me something useful, but because you come from trauma, you're telling it very loudly and not always very kindly. But I am going to listen, but I'm not going to make it all about you. I'm here. I will kind of pay some attention. I'll be really kind and welcoming to you. And, also not like completely getting pulled into this vortex of the thoughts and the feelings. And again, it's not easy. Sometimes it just will override, and you just need to ride it out and just be as gentle to yourself as you can during it. But hopefully over time, if you can practice this in a way, it means that when they come up, you can feel quite good about it, because you're like, oh, brilliant, this is an opportunity to do that other thing, to do it differently than I did before, to just be really kind and gentle and spacious around it, instead of like getting pulled into it or trying to push them away.
I think there are some times about this kind of stuff, particularly like well-being, mental health kind of area that we talk about a lot, that there can be a lot of like one-size-fits-all advice out there, which is also really uncommon. I think there's a lot of that around this, but so I think there is an element of that you'll get to your own place of how you can do this, holding it gently and not throwing it away or grasping it. But I think that's like the philosophical kind of place that you need to be at, and you'll have your own like way of doing it. Like we haven't suggested that that if you get an intrusive thought, you should do mindful meditation, or you should write things down, or that you
those
should
things
go
really
up and take yourselves for a walk. There's the should there often an advice that really isn't helpful. So it's about like, what tools do you have at your disposal to get you to the place of holding it gently and not throwing it away? And
I swear, it's absolutely genius what you're saying. Like, I was trying to follow a lot of these kind of mindfulness guidelines for years, and it wasn't really working for me. And when I finally let it go and stopped trying to do these formal practices, then I found my way to something. And it actually looks a lot like some of those things that are suggested, but because as soon as you're trying to do it in that should way, it just doesn't work. You have to find the way that works for you. And it's similar to, but it will be your own particular vibe on it. You might talk yourself through it out loud, and you might find that works way better than doing it inside, or you might find you have to move your body while you're doing it. That's what works for you. So really trusting that, it sounds a bit hokey, but a kind of inner wisdom of like, if you can, the advice, but you find your way of doing it, and it's really fine that looks different from somebody else's.
I mean, we would always say, aim to write your own how to make your own intrusive thoughts user guide. I think there is with with everything that we've talked about, all the tools that you already have, that it's okay to do this in a way that feels okay for you, which is, and if you have a should story or a should thought in your head, that's another that will feed your intrusive thoughts even more.
Yeah. And it's biopsychosocial, and a lot of these thoughts do come from the shitty world around us, but we've said a lot about that on other podcasts, I think.
No, I mean, I'm always up for having a rant about neoliberalism.
Yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of them come from. I think we really individualize it and think, oh, I'm a bit broken because I have these intrusive thoughts, it's because of trauma. It's like, well, a lot of them are there because of neoliberal capitalism and the way that does a number on us and tries to make us feel like we're not okay.
We'll talk about it. So it is. So there are two things going on. So the two things going on. So materially, like the way that neoliberal capitalism has done a number on us is that a lot of us are poorer or find it difficult to access support that was there before. Or don't feel so much part of a community because everyone has to travel for work and there's been a diaspora and communities have moved and the support structures are no longer there that were in place like 40, 50 years ago. So materially, we're poorer unless you're in the top, unless you're in the 1%.
No one who listens to this podcast
is in the 1%, because you can't get in the 1% by doing the things that we advise in our podcast. So if this is not anyway. So materially it's harder, but also the common sense hegemony. So the way that we're meant to think about ourselves is that mental health and well-being and our thoughts we are entirely responsible for those things. So neoliberalism has done a number on us twice. One, denying us the resources and to be well, and also making us unwell. And two, making us think that we are entirely responsible for that, and that all we have to do is to work harder, to buy all the self-help books, work harder on ourselves, get an app for doing mindful meditation every morning, and take an hour's walk every day. And that they're the things. No, and it makes us feel entirely, and therefore it completely reinforces the idea of mental well-being being about fucking resilience and us getting over it. And it's like, one thing that you can do, like, I guess maybe this is the last bit of advice, which is to give yourself like a huge pat on the back for doing as well as you're doing with the tools that you have. To be able to, if you can, find support structures that are around you and the people around you, and to be able to talk to people around you about this, hopefully for them to make it okay for you to be able to talk about that. So they're like material things that to do, but also to recognize that that this is society, capitalism doing a number on you, and to give yourself like a huge hug for dealing with it, for getting as far as you have, and for there's a term that I want to use that I can't, it's not quite coming to my head, but just to give yourself a lot of leeway, a lot of give yourself the benefit of the doubt. It's like we're all being gaslit by the system.
We really are, and I guess I do that with feelings a lot, that sense of like, oh, what of this is mine, and what of it is the wider systems and structures just playing out within me, through me. But I think you're right, intrusive thoughts could be dealt with in quite a similar way of like, okay, a lot of these, especially like bad thoughts about our bodies and how they look, or bad thoughts about how we're not a good enough person, like that is where they come from. We've been sold this number for so long. 100%. So like, that can just lift a bit. It doesn't stop it happening, but it's like, it's good to name like, this is what it is. And it is again, and then it's a political act actually to be trying to befriend ourselves and treat ourselves kindly in that place.
And we've got lots of episodes about that, dear listener. We've got self-care, self-love,
gentleness,
slowness, being with our feelings. Oh, we've got something. But anyway, thanks for that excellent question.
Really good.
Final question, Meg-John. So this is one where we're going to yell at someone's friends.
Yes. So this is about somebody, I mean, we don't need to give the details, just somebody was in a relationship with a man and is now with a woman, Sounds like they handled that transition really well, actually. But their friends are really reacting badly to it. They're sort of saying that it's a betrayal, you know, that the whole time that it's a woman who's written in that the whole time that they were with the man, that they must have been lying if they're attracted to a woman now, you know, that sort of sense of like, well, they must have really been a lesbian all along. And like really kind of critical and unhelpful friend response.
So yeah, I mean, the line in the question is, the narrative seems to be that I've been lying to everyone my whole life, which isn't the case. It's like,
no,
great. So
it's not the case.
So another way of like wording the question is that someone has finally realized that that this relationship is not for them, and they found this other relationship, and also with it there is new aspects of their sexuality that is being revealed to everyone, and that's just being revealed to themselves as well. We don't know, and it's like they're stepping out and being themselves, and their friends gaslighting them and saying, no, get back in, no, go back into the relationship, no, we don't want you to change. It's awful.
It's really awful.
On the one, when I first read it, I was like, you know, my focus was on the person writing in, which and you know what it is that they can do, but this is a really good example of where our advice work needs to be like calling out the shitty behavior where we see it, and this is the shit behavior.
And I feel like it's led to this person like questioning their sexuality and where does it come from and stuff. And you don't need to, you know, you don't need to do any of that. I mean, if you're interested in, you know, why your sexuality has shifted over time, then that's fine to explore it. But it feels like this is being driven by other people. You know, it's just so fine for you to have loved one person and then not loved them in that way anymore, and then loved another person. Like, you just don't need to do any explanation or anything around that. Like that is just a really normal thing that people do. And the fact that gender has shifted, you know, could mean that you're bisexual, and that's fine. Could mean that your sexuality is fluid and it's shifted over time, and that's also fine. You know, there's a lot in here that's like much more wider cultural patterns of like invisibility and erasure of bisexuality. You know, if it is that you're attracted to men and to women and maybe to other genders, then that's fine. But that's being erased by this idea that somehow you've done a betraying thing by being attracted to one gender and then going to another, which is, you know, really bad stereotype against bisexuality, that that it doesn't really exist, that you're only one thing or another. And that, or, you know, that it's sexual fluidity. You know, everybody's sexuality changes over time. You know, my go-to on this is like, if it didn't, we'd all be attracted to teenagers still. Like, that wouldn't be cool. Right? Like, you know, your sexuality changes a lot over time in terms of the age of people you're attracted to. So how come it can't in terms of the gender that you're attracted to, or other features of a person that you're attracted to? Like, clearly sexuality changes over time.
I've not heard that line before, MJ.
It's true though, isn't it?
It's good. It's good.
Right?
I did really fancy my maths teacher at school, but anyway. It's different. That's a different podcast.
Yeah.
In fact, that's not even a podcast, is it? That should be a private conversation between me and you. Difficult to know, doesn't it? Sometimes we'll press record, we'll stop. Start chatting.
Just start talking.
There's a bit here where there's a bit here about their body that they're talking about. Again, where we think you're a woman, but if dear listener, you could tell us what your pronouns are and tell us what just so it makes it clear for us. We're kind of going between they and she, but
I think because the person said something about being seen as a lesbian, that I'm assuming that they're identifying as a woman. But obviously let us know if we're wrong there.
Help us out in the future just by that'd be great. So they're talking about the difference between having she's talking about the difference between having sex with her ex-husband and sex with a woman, and she was talking about how her vagina was dry, and she'd experienced bleeding after sex a few times from penetrative sex. But then when she has sex with her female partner, there's everything's great, everything's fine. And basically her body wasn't reacting very well to penetration from a man. And so there's a few things to talk about here. Like there's some basic, we don't talk about genitals very much. We should do a genitals show. Because it would be there's so much to say about it. But you know, the vagina responds gets aroused. You know, it's surrounded by lots and lots of blood vessels that enable the smooth tissue to relax, the muscles need to relax around the vagina, and then vaginal fluid, which actually comes from plasma in the blood, which secretes through the vaginal walls and gets wet. Now, not every vagina behaves in the same way. Obviously, there are neo-vaginas which don't get wet in that way often, but also some natal vaginas, so vaginas where people have grown their own vagina, I guess. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Vagina you might have been born with. Where was I? Sometimes there is like a degree to which there is wetness, but there is wetness and there isn't wetness. But if we think about a throbbing vagina that can easily envelop something that like a penis or a sex toy or a finger, then that is basically all I'm saying here, is that this woman has found that is how her vagina is responding, and that's a way of thinking about it. So this idea of penis penetrating vagina is completely different from a throbbing wet vagina enveloping something else. And so even in that way, to be able to think about the vagina in that way it is like a story about the broader context in which we see sexual desire and arousal and how that relates to gender and sexuality. It's quite a big story in this small part.
Yeah.
And all I would say here is, what's your body telling you? And your body's saying yes to this. And there might be lots of reasons. It might not just be about men and penises. It might be about particular. It might be some trauma going on. There might be but all you have to do is to look at what your body's saying now, and your body's saying this feels good. And that's the thing. And there are many reasons why our bodies can't feel good. Our bodies are not just our bodies. It's biopsychosocial. They're being constantly read. And our view of our bodies is interpolated through all of those different through the bio and the psycho. But all it comes back to is what my driving instructor used to say to me. Bear in mind, I've never passed my driving test, but bear in mind. But his
I don't see how mirror signal maneuver is relevant here.
No. His advice to me was, Justin, if it feels good, do it. Now, learning how to drive, that's extraordinarily bad advice. That's very, very bad advice. It felt good for me to change lane at the Pentagon Island, 1994 this would be, change lane during rush hour at Pentagon Island, and to cut a lorry up behind me on my test. I got 3 Ds for dangerous. It's terrible advice for driving. However, maybe he was just giving me very good relationships and sex advice. Maybe that's what he was doing. He should have said, this is very bad driving advice, Justin.
But someday you'll be doing a podcast and you'll be glad of this.
I think that's good advice. And the thing is, it's hard just to go with your body when your friends and broad society is saying that everything about us is not okay, but this is definitely saying this is definitely okay. And so even if you can just get to that point of your body's telling you this, then that hopefully that might feel affirming to you.
Exactly. And it just doesn't really matter, whether it is that your sexuality was one thing and now it's changed to another thing, or whether it's always been, one thing, which is, say, bisexual or pansexual, or, whether, whether it was about that one person and now this different person, it's not really relevant what their gender is, or whether that last relationship wasn't very great on consent, and that's why the body responded as it did then, and now this is a better one on that. It just doesn't really matter, which of those it is, or a combination or something else. It's just about where are you at?
I should just flag up something about. Sorry, I just wanted to flag up about what I was saying. Not all relationships are sexual. You don't have to have really good sex in order for a relationship to be okay. I'm not suggesting that there is, there's a corollary here. All I'm saying is that in this information that we've been given, it's really clear that this is a small story telling a larger story, that it is okay, but that everyone around is saying it's not okay, and actually it is okay.
Yeah, it is okay. Yeah, exactly. That aspect of it, of course. So yeah, it's sort of, we can, again, maybe we do on another podcast, go into why do we have the sexualities that we have. We've talked about that in the past. It's biopsychosocial, but in a sense, I don't want to get too into that, because I do feel like the important piece here is, you've had an experience which is a perfectly valid experience. You've actually handled it well and ethically, and it's just that this group of friends cannot handle you changing, as all people do in life, and are using these cultural stories around sexuality, which are misguided understandings of how sexuality actually works, to kind of gaslight you and impose this normativity on you, and that's really tough. And
it's like fucking conversion therapy. It's fucking
it's really outrageous. I just wish people would get more educated about sexuality and how it works. Like there is there's a little zine on my website, Rewriting the Rules, called about sexual configurations theory, SCT, which is like the really up-to-date science on this, and it really shows you how sexuality is really complicated and multidimensional. And it strikes me that it will be for your friends as well, for this group of people. Like if they would just tune into their own sexualities, they'd discover that those change over time and that they're infinitely complex as well. So to be trying to impose this really simplistic normative kind of understanding of sexuality on somebody else is really out of line, as far as I'm concerned.
One of the depressing things about this is that when there's like a scarcity of how much happiness that can go around, it's almost like some people are trying to. It's kind of like your friends are like wanting to deny you your choices and the attractions and the desires that you have, because it's almost as if, well, if she can have that, then why can't I have this? And also, as if it's like a zero-sum game, and actually,
but that is what happens.
That is normativity happens. That
is how normativity happens. It's like to question it is seen as really. my iPad fell off. I don't know how that looked.
Perhaps your video's gone off actually, but it's all right. Maybe your iPad is telling us that we've gone off.
No, it's good. It's good. What happened was the battery went low, so I plugged it in. And plugging it in. So that's what's been going on. Very exciting.
And allowing your phone to envelop the charger.
Yes, exactly. That's what happened. There was a bit at the a bit at the end here about I haven't even the writer said I haven't even touched on whether I would be welcomed into the LGBTQI plus scene, given that I have been seen as heterosexual for so long, and that's an issue. That community isn't always welcoming of people where the sexual fluidity or bisexuality or whatever label or we want or not to put on this. However, there certainly is a lot of queer community, for want of a better word, that would be really accepting and supportive, and I think it's really valuable to have friends who are of that community, because that will counteract some of this bullshit that you've been getting, quite frankly. But it's worth being mindful of, like, where are the bisexual community definitely would be very understanding of people having feelings for different genders over time. Things that describe themselves as queer rather than gay might be a better place to go. But it's sort of like shopping around, finding your people, maybe via the person that you're with now, if they're already part of those kind of communities, or maybe finding your own way. Certainly, the kind of bi, pan, queer, fluid
maybe
communities.
Also like feminist communities as well, perhaps. If it's clear that they are intersectional feminists, because also it's clear sexist double standards going on, and the expectation that women are supposed to just have these relationships, and it's just the thing that really makes me cross about this is the painful sex bit. It's that 1 in 10 women regularly have painful sex, and it's because of the stories that we say that this is what you're supposed to do, and that's the thing that it's it makes me so cross. But you just never have to do that. You just never have to. You never have to put painful sex, mediocre sex you don't want. But it is really hard under normativity to not sometimes have unwanted sex and painful sex.
Yeah.
It's just a really good example good / bad example of where normativity is around us in the small as well as the big. It's the micro and the macro.
Just the everyday conversations.
Exactly. That it isn't just this thing that happens out there in culture. That it pervades everything, and it's shitty. And I hope you can find some new friends. / also that your existing friends like step up and be better friends. It's also like if to be a good friend, you have to take your friends as you find them and allow your friends to be and to grow. Like we talked about in the earlier question, it's being there with your friends and allowing them to flourish and helping each other flourish.
Yeah,
that's what
that is
friendship.
So it's worth questioning. Yeah, is this friendship if it has this judgmental and kind of trying to pull everybody back into normativity kind of way? And if it gets super hard as well, like there are really good LGBTQI plus services that you could reach out to that definitely the workers and the volunteers in those kind of places would be clued up about bi, pan and fluid rather than just being kind of gay.
Would you recommend Switchboard?
Switchboard's great, London Friend and ELOP in London, Metro in London. There's also LGBT Foundation up in Manchester. I'm not sure where the person's located, but Switchboard's
there are
accessibility
local groups
around. And local groups. Yeah, groups can be great. And Bi as well as Bi Pride UK is worth looking into. They've got a lot of resources. The Bisexual Index, Biscuit, and all sorts of places that you could have a look, and they're all quite Googleable. Yeah.
Go well. I hope that everything works out well for you, and we hope that our advice has helped there. And that goes for all of our listeners. They are our questions. We went long, but there's a lot to say, isn't there? Like, I don't know how anyone can do these really. I don't like. You can maybe if you listen to our podcast when you're washing the pots, maybe that takes you like 20 minutes. You just listen to it a bit at a time, don't you? You don't have to.
Yeah, that's what people do.
No one sits down and reads War and Peace in a weekend, do they?
Now we're War and Peace, huh?
No, we're not like. We're better than Tolstoy.
We're better than Tolstoy. Maybe a little more engaged.
Did you ever read Tolstoy's sex advice column? It was rubbish.
How was that?
Heteronormative as fuck. So,
oh, was it? Yeah, surprising.
Yeah. Wasn't neoliberal though, but anyway. So, if you've enjoyed this episode again, please subscribe to our Patreon. Help us to put these episodes together. The more support we get, the more time we can make it our week for it, the more we can do. And so it's patreon.com/Meg-John and Justin. Our zines are available to our website, megjohnandjustin.com/publications. You can tweet us at megjohnjustin. If you've been playing bingo during this episode and you want to drag us, you can send us a picture of which boxes you've ticked. If you want, hashtag it MJ and J bingo. It's another thing for me to be grumpy about, isn't it? Otherwise,
it is.
I'm not going to mention. I'm not going to mention it. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of saying that thing that I'm grumpy about. And also, you're not getting the tip at the end either that we usually give at the end of every episode.
Yeah. Oh, we're just withholding that this time. Yeah.
Withheld. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Katie, for all
we love our bingo card.
We love it. Yeah. We love it. We really, really love it. I'm just being performatively grumpy in an amusing way.
Yes, I think that will be understood.
I hope so. All right then, should we go?
Yeah. Thanks all. Until next time.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Ciao. Bye.